Your life begins with your partner. Only when you get married that your life begins, and everything that you wish to do, your dreams, passion, all of that has to be done with your husband. That is one of the main markers of any marriage failure.
So Charvi, is the idea of the right partner actually a myth that we are psychologically clinging to?
Well, it's not usually the big issues that break a marriage. It's the everyday, small little things that make people get to that place. Saying something like, grow up yaar, it has a very disrespectful tone underneath it. Over a period of time, and it keeps happening every day, when your partner is constantly looking down upon you, it's the biggest predictor of any relationship that might not work in the long run. I can't do without you. You know that I need you. It might feel like it's love, but it's actually emotional dependency.
If conflicts are not resolved correctly, the best of relationships can be doomed. Everybody can love, but how do you fight well?
We've started to become so quick in cutting off people. We notice one trait and we're like, oh, that person is a red flag, I need to cut off. That becomes unhealthy. Then we're just labeling people.
Real connections is where somebody can share a load. We romanticize the idea of one person being the hero who will take over everything in your life and your life will be beautiful.
But that's not the case.
So Charvi, psychology tells us compatibility matters, right? But if compatibility was the secret, divorce wouldn't exist among seemingly perfect couples. Is the idea of the right partner actually a myth that we are psychologically clinging to?
Well, I would say compatibility does matter, but it's not everything. Compatibility is probably a good starting point. So, of course, it's important that you see whether your partner meets the right fit, the things that you're looking for. But I think one important factor that we miss out on is the emotional compatibility. And more so, not just in good times, but especially when times are difficult. When there is a conflict, how does your partner and you, how do you come together as a dynamic? You know, who makes it up? Who repairs the conflict? Is the other person able to understand you? I think this is an important thing that we often overlook. We look for all the good things and our check boxes, but we don't really get to the other part of it, that okay, what do we do when things are not really working? So the idea of the right partner, well, I would say yes, it exists. But at the same time, it is not that you meet your right partner and things are going to just go smooth. Even with the right partner, you will have to put in the work. There will be conflicts because we're coming with different backgrounds, different upbringing, different needs and expectations. So obviously there will be conflicts. There will be hard times in the relationship. The spark may not always be there. So yes, you might be compatible, but you will still have to do the work. And I guess that's the myth that a lot of us believe, that if I find the right partner, things will be very easy, it will be intuitive, it will be smooth. But very often that's not the case.
Yeah, people think it's going to be movie-like. You know, because the movie actually ends when the two people get together. There's no movie after that.
Yes.
Because after that is the real battle. And I think it's very important to, correct me if I'm wrong, understand that when everything goes wrong, everything you can think of, financially, your health, emotionally, things are not working out for you. Where does your partner stand then? Or where will they stand then if you were to get married? I think you should look at that, emotion management in the hard times. You're absolutely right there. So when couples say, we grew apart, is that psychological evolution or simply lack of emotional discipline?
I think it could be both. When we say that, yeah, we've grown apart, there can actually be when two people grow apart in literal sense, which means that sometimes, and obviously because relationships are not stagnant and we wouldn't want it so, right? We want individuals to grow in the relationships. Now, problem happens when two people grow in their own parallel lives, when they don't really get the other person to be a part of their growth. And sometimes the other person resists, that's why they were not a part of it. And sometimes we are just going in that one direction, and that's why we forget. So for example, a lot of us, let's say I suddenly get into fitness, and I'm like gotten very passionate about fitness, be it physical fitness, mental fitness. I'm going to therapy for my workout, but my partner is just where they were, they are not very enthusiastic about it. So when I come back home and I talk about it, I said, what happened in my gym session, and the other person reacts with, yeah, whatever, this is your daily thing, and they don't give me the enthusiasm that I'm hoping to get. So that's when what happens is I'll stop sharing that part of my world with the other person, and vice versa. And that's when the disconnection starts to happening. And that's when I'm growing and I'm growing apart from the other person. In fact, I don't know if you've heard of John Gottman. He is one of the most respected persons when it comes to couples therapy, and also when it comes to decades of research that he's done on couples in terms of certain markers that make a couple work and doesn't work. So he calls a term, he says something about turning toward and turning away. So turning toward is when we make small bids for connection, like in everyday lives, that, hey, this is something exciting, I want you to check it out. So these are small little bits that we do, when we're living with somebody, right? When the other person responds with that kind of excitement and enthusiasm, that they want to understand what you want to share, even if they may not hold the same kind of passion, that's turning toward. And turning away is that I'm trying to get your attention, but maybe you're on the phone, you're barely looking up, or you're just dismissing, that, whatever you're doing, it's not of my interest. So that's turning away. So when a lot of times, when one person is asking or bidding in that relationship, and there's a lot of turning away, that's when things starts to grow apart. I guess that's how I would like to put it.
So if two emotionally healthy people meet, is love easier, or does too much self-awareness sometimes kill romance?
I don't think self-awareness can really kill anything. Of course, if two people are more self-aware, it can mean the relationship is healthier. But I wouldn't say easier. Two different things. So when I say it can be healthier, which means that if two people are more emotionally aware, they're probably more secure, they are probably more understanding, so which means that they are less likely to take things personally. So if you have a complaint, if I am more emotionally attuned and more emotionally aware, I might look at it as curiosity rather than seeing it as an attack and getting defensive or dismissing what you have to say. I might be more curious that, okay, let me try and understand where this person is coming from, what is happening over here. So when you respond with curiosity rather than dismissing or escalating it, rather attacking the other person, automatically things become more easier to navigate through. So I'm not saying conflicts will not be there, but it'll be less escalating, it'll be less damaging, less chaotic, and naturally we both might have triggers, but we'll be more understanding of those triggers. We'll know where they're coming from, so we'll be able to sort of make space for it, right? So yes, I would say being emotionally aware is quite a strength in a relationship. But it doesn't make things easier, it doesn't make the problems go away, it just makes you more resilient to handle the problems more effectively in a more peaceful manner, I would say.
But sometimes in theory you understand a lot of emotional resilience, you understand emotional regulation, you might listen to some of the really good content out there, you might read the right books, but when it actually comes to your partner, your conditioning can be so strong that you forget about it. And everything seems like an attack, everything seems like a complaint, and everything seems like they are trying to put you down. What happens there then?
That's a very important question, because now we see that very often because of social media. I think people have a lot of vocabulary. They know how to name something or label something. So might say that there's a lot of awareness, but when it comes to behavior and actions, we don't see the results. And I see very often, like I have people coming to therapy also, and they say that I have abandonment issues, or I know I have avoidant attachment style. They throw these words around, and they may not be wrong. They're right in identifying that. But things don't end there with awareness. Awareness will just make you realize that, okay, this is what I have. But the second part comes when, with intention of taking accountability for that behavior.
Correct.
Right?
Because that's the hardest part.
That's the hardest part. And a lot of times what we've started to do is we've started to use that as an excuse to either shield ourselves from accountability or to weaponize somebody else by labeling them that, hey, they have this problem or this issue. So then that becomes a problem. So I think this emotional vocabulary or this awareness that we have today, therapy speak as we call it,
Yeah.
I feel that, yeah, while it's very helpful if we use it the right way for our own self-awareness, for our own self-reflection, that where am I going wrong, what do I need to work upon, and gently like pushing ourselves to get there. But when we start using it as a shield and, to weaponize it, against the other person, that's when we're just using it wrong. So let me explain this. Just recently, in fact, I had a couple session wherein there was a very clear dynamic. The husband often withdrew whenever there was a conflict, and when he withdrew, the wife sort of felt like he didn't care, and she felt even more riled up. And when they started coming to therapy, I think soon she realized there's something called attachment styles. And then she was like, oh, my husband has an avoidant attachment style. So then every time when he started to do that, she would just go ahead and she would accuse him that, see, again, you're becoming avoidant. You have an avoidant attachment style. This is why we are facing this problem and this issue. So while there was a good identification of the attachment style, but what happened is she started weaponizing it against him. So the awareness was good, but it's about also giving space, to that awareness. And it's about also checking that, okay, what am I doing that is bringing up that attachment style of my partner?
Correct.
So it's possible that, this person, the wife, she was being very critical. And whenever she would criticize, he would feel attacked and he would withdraw. So awareness also means checking that, okay, what am I doing to contribute to this dynamic? And the moment we start asking ourselves that question, we will see that it has a ripple effect. Then the other person's behavior also starts to change according to that.
Yeah, you're right, because I don't think identifying is the answer only. Like identifying, I think it's just step one. Then I think accountability for yourself in the equation, because I think what is also starting to happen is, like you said, social media awareness, words thrown out, people are becoming aware of the terms. But that is one side of the story. You identifying your partner, your sibling, your friend, a parent figure, all of these people, what patterns they may possess and why they're behaving in a certain way. But what about the contributing part? What about the enabling part for that behavior to come out? I think that's lacking. And that's lacking purely because that's not the part that people are making you aware of.
Yeah.
Everyone's identifying that, oh, I have a narcissistic partner. But what are you doing to bring out that narcissism? Or where are you contributing? Or what is the equation why you got together in the first place? Why were they attracted to you? What is it that you possess? That is enabling this kind of equation coming together. So I think, yeah, that kind of accountability is lacking, I think. And I think it'll be great if somebody hearing this can look at what are you doing in the equation. Even though your partner may, let's say 99% have all the attributes that you're not looking to handle. But what is the 1% that is enabling this 99%?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I agree. So let's talk about the psychological contract of marriage. Marriage today demands romance, friendship, emotional support, financial partnership, sexual compatibility, and personal growth, all from one person.
Yeah.
Have we psychologically overloaded marriage with unrealistic expectations?
I think as you're saying it only, it sounds overwhelming, right? There's so many demands. So of course, it puts a lot of pressure on that one person who's supposed to give you all of it. And obviously, it's impossible for one person to fulfill all your needs. We are all humans, but we're also like flawed humans. We can't be perfect in all of those different criteria. And which is why I think I see a lot of people coming in feeling like that their partner is failing them, not because they're failing as a whole, but maybe they're not able to meet them in one or two aspects. And this is something which I see very commonly now. Back then, I think in our parents' generation or before that, there were very clear roles and expectations in a marriage in terms of gendered role mostly, which also meant that, women had to adjust and just like sort of go ahead with being the caretaker or being the nurturer, and the man had to be the provider. And there were like these clear expectations, but there weren't expectations of what we have today about emotionally compatible, or somebody who's also attractive, somebody who's also like socially, who's meeting you at par, somebody who's also equally educated like you, who's doing well like you. So there's so many layers that have gotten added. And also because of right now the social media apps that we have, the dating apps that we have, I think we've also started to feel that there are many choices out there. So we don't want to just settle, but that also means that we've become very quick to dismiss somebody who is not meeting us at meeting in some other areas of our life. But that's what I want to share, that it's impossible for a person to meet all of those criteria. I think I want to bring up something from Dear Zindagi. I think Shah Rukh Khan, said it beautifully, how he explained it, that why do we need one person to fulfill everything? Why can't we have a friend, just a coffee friend who you go and meet coffee with every week, a friend who you talk about, books with, because they just get you. You have that alignment. You read the same books probably, or a friend, you can talk about travels, with. So I think it's a beautiful concept, and actually, when we bring down that expectation and not expect everything from one partner, and that automatically releases that pressure. And especially in today's times when we are expected to fill so many hats, it's all the more important that we are not looking at one person to fill all of those hats. And given to that, now we add another layer, which is the layer in the Indian context, the layer of family expectations, the layer of patriarchy, right? And that becomes even more challenging to navigate. So one is your own personal expectations, and then add to, the family and the patriarchy and different roles and expectations that you have to fulfill. So there can also be a mismatch. And if you expect the partner to fulfill all of that, I think that's just too much to expect. And you're already like paving the path for feeling like that it's not going to be a success, that there will be some shortcoming or the other.
Also, I think like historically we lived in massive families, villages raised kids, right? Like they used to say.
Yeah.
So we lived in very big communities. And historically, there were so many people who would take up your day, your time, and fill up your different buckets of expectations. So you had a lot of family members. Firstly, we lived in large families. We lived in large communities. Somebody you're working out in the morning with, somebody you're cooking with, somebody's helping you with your child. There are parents and grandparents and other relatives who are living with you, who are taking up your evening time, let's say for entertainment. And then you have your partner who you're spending your time and sharing your life with. So I just feel like there was an array of people sharing different interests, different time zones with you within a day. So your attention was also distributed evenly. So it was not like 24 hours, you have that with that one person who's going to fill every bucket of yours. I think the problem has also become nuclear living, where you're only with this one person, your child, or even if you don't have a child, you're married, let's say, is that one partner and you. Now you want that one partner to fulfill your entire day, all your expectations, all your interests, emotionally, physically, financially. It's not possible. So I think the problem has also become, I'm not saying there's something against nuclear living, but it's just, if you see historically how we lived in massive communities, we were able to share our load in different ways with different people. Today we're expecting our entire load to be shared by one person. And I think that's not humanly possible for one person to take all your load. To be able to share your financial worries, your emotional worries, your physical worries. You want to go work out, your partner should be able to work out with you. You want to share your finances, they should be looking at everything that you want now and, here and now. They should be able to solve all your emotional problems. So I think what we are also missing is where we're coming from. We need to look back at how we did community living. Now communities become online. It's mostly numbers, likes. It's hidden, people you don't know. Real connections is where somebody can share a load. And I think real connections is something we are kind of overlooking. We have overlooked that factor.
Yeah.
We feel like we don't need it. We romanticize the idea of one person being the hero who will, take over everything in your life, and your life will be beautiful. But it takes a lot for that one person to take over everything.
Absolutely.
This is my understanding of it.
Yeah, no, I guess that's a beautiful perspective. And I would like to add even social media, for example, when, a lot of influencers, they show curated feeds of them and their partner doing things together, going out there, even working out together, traveling together, and then sitting at home and playing with their child together. So when we see that, it's very natural for us to believe that that's the norm.
And that's happening 24 hours in their life.
Absolutely, yeah, right. And that's not even the real picture, right? But because we see that very often, we've started to believe that that's how it should be. What we are not seeing is behind the scenes.
And that it's a curated moment.
Absolutely. So, which is why I think a lot of young minds, because we are constantly on our phones, this notion is being fed from the very start that, hey, this is, your person should be able to do all of it with you.
Yeah.
And then there is also the conditioning that we go through, especially for women. This, I feel, not just in our generation, it's happened from generation after generation, where we are fed this notion that, hey, your life begins with your partner. Or you want to go see the world, get married, shaadi kar lo, then do whatever you want with your husband. He will show you around. Oh, you want to wear short dresses, okay, your husband will do that. So that's a notion that, only when you get married that your life begins, and everything that you wish to do, your dreams, passion, all of that has to be done with your husband. So you go only with that expectation that, okay, my partner is supposed to fulfill me in all of those areas. And when we meet the reality, suddenly it feels like, oh my God, where am I?
Yeah, you're disappointed.
Yeah, it's not happening, because it's impossible for any person to meet that. But also that my expectation is here, and then when it's here, there's bound to be that, big gap between those expectations.
Also, I think I'll add to what you're saying, all these expectations that are put, like you said, in women's minds. What about the fact that what are you bringing to the table? I think that is also not accountable here. A lot of women are not taught that what are you bringing to the marriage? Okay, you expect all of this from the man in a marriage, but what are you giving? I think that also has not been taught, and that also is not spoken about. That what are you going to do tomorrow for the marriage, for your own family, for your own husband, and how are you going to make sure that whatever you want is coming to you? It's like I should just get it because now I'm married. It also life doesn't work like that. So it's not like you've gone to a new job and now everything will be perfect. You'll have to work in that job. So I think that's anything in life. You have to work towards it. Historically, also, marriage was all about stability. Today, it's all about fulfillment. Do you think modern relationships are collapsing under the pressure of happiness?
I would say yes, but that may not be a bad thing entirely. Like you put out, like traditionally it was very clear roles, defined roles. It was more about, I just want a stable life with my partner. But now we have a lot more expectations from our partner. We also want them to be our go-to person. We want them, like we pointed out, that, so many different needs and wants and expectations. So while, of course, that extra expectation can be unhealthy, but wanting your partner to actually understand you, to get you, to make you feel seen and heard, and to want that emotional safety, to want your marriage to also be fulfilling and not just something that's stable, is not necessarily a bad thing. So I do feel that because a lot of women are now more financially independent, and which means that they're not in the marriage just because they have to. Now there is a choice. So a lot of women have started to ask this question that, okay, is this relationship adding value to my life? And when they find that they are constantly being dismissed, they feel unheard in the relationship, they feel neglected in the relationship, they feel alone despite the fact that they are married, and they have to bear that emotional load all the time. And they're also taking up a lot of the mental load that generally women are taking up a lot. So it's very natural for them to wonder that, does the marriage make sense to me now? If it's not adding any value to me, then would it mean the alternate is better? At least it will lead to more emotional peace, if nothing else. So I see a lot of women approaching that question quite a bit. So even in therapy sessions, I see that a lot of women are initiating this question more than men. And I've seen even globally, that's the trend. Like statistically also, more than 70% times, it's the women who's initiating the divorce and not the man. Which means that, in a way that we are also raising the bar to what a relationship should be like, or what I want in a marriage.
Absolutely.
And that actually is quite a good road that we are, walking towards.
Yeah. We're not looking at the bare minimum anymore. That was okay and accepted back in the day. But my point is not that. My point was not to say that take the bare minimum like it was and it's good enough. But my point was that also that one person cannot do the 100% that you're expecting. You know, it's not possible for any human being to fulfill. Like you said, we watch the curated moments on social media and we feel like, oh, look at that couple, you know, they post about their dinners together and their lunches together or their trips together, and that's their entire life, and he's doing everything for her. It seems like that. He's doing everything for her. But those are curated moments. I'm sure she's equally putting in the work as well. I think that also disparity is kind of not spoken about and not discussed as much as. I agree, fulfillment is so important, and fulfillment is important in everything. Why just a marriage? I need to be fulfilled in my relationship with my friends, with my siblings, with my parents. Now we are aware of this fulfillment. Hence, we are seeking it. I don't think before people even seek fulfillment from their parents. They're like, my father barely talks to me, but that's okay. That's how my father is. For example. And it was okay to have that relationship with your father where your father barely spoke to you. But today it's not like that. You will want a fulfilled relationship even with your parents. So I think seeking fulfillment is absolutely amazing. It's great we're heading in that direction. But I think it's very important to calculate how are you contributing to that fulfillment as well. It is not all about
it goes both ways.
want.
You cannot be feeling entitled that, hey, I need to have these without putting in the work.
Correct.
So it has to go both ways. I need to also make the other person feel fulfilled, right?
Correct.
So,
So when in your 13 years of your career in counseling and psychology, tell me, do you see marriages failing because of real problems, or do you think they're failing because people have started to believe everyone deserves someone better?
I think that's a good question to ask. In my therapy sessions, I think most of the time you'll find it interesting to know that it's not usually the big issues that break a marriage or get people to think about that alternate or that question. Most of the time, it's the everyday small little things that make people get to that place. So we talked about turning in and turning away. So if we bring it down to day-to-day issues. So for example, a very important trait, or rather a very important concept, aspect that sort of usually breaks a marriage is something that we call as contempt. Contempt is, now let me try and explain what it would typically mean. So one is criticism, where I criticize the partner that, hey, you were supposed to give me a call when you got done with work, but you did not call and I kept waiting. You know, I felt hurt that you did not call. So that's criticism, right? When you're sharing what hurt you and at the same time you're like, you did not call. So criticism is important because you're supposed to communicate what hurt you. But contempt is when we believe that we are morally superior to the other person. So that means my tone would become condescending. It might also mean that I might start labeling you. So for example, instead of saying that, hey, you did not call, I was hurt, I might be like, you know, you're always doing this to me. You are always, you never care about me. You're such an ignorant person. So I might start adding labels, also start adding always and never to that statement, and that sounds very contemptuous. Plus add body language into it, so rolling the eyes, or just the tone changing to that, hey, you are morally not up to my level, you're a lazy person, or you are you don't care, you don't have emotions. When we start putting all those labels, and sometimes that happens as a joke also, so that's difficult to really notice and understand, but it's very normalized in relationships. And I've seen it even within the therapy session, when two people are talking to each other like this but completely unaware how disrespectful that is. So something like, oh, tumse na ho paega, or even saying something like, grow up yaar, like it sounds like very basic, like we use this very time, like we might even laugh after it, but it has a very important disrespectful tone underneath it. So it's once, twice, yes, it doesn't matter. But then over a period of time, and it keeps happening every day, when your partner is constantly looking down upon you, and you might be doing that too, that is what, starts to, add up and add up and add up. And slowly, that is one of the main markers of any marriage failing. And this is not just me speaking, even the research speaking. It's the biggest predictor of any marriage or any relationship that might not work in the long run if there is contempt present. So very often when I see or notice contempt, of course we will have issues with our partner, but quickly if we change, we check with ourselves and we change the tone, instead of using always and never, we just speak about that particular instance or incident. Instead of labeling the person, we talk about the behavior of the person we don't like. That, hey, I would really appreciate if you keep me informed, rather than saying that, hey, you never care about me. So moving away from labels and speaking and being more specific about the incident or that behavior that's not working for you, that's usually what really helps. But yeah, like to answer your question, it's not very big issues that really break up a marriage generally. That's what I have seen. It's these small everyday things that add up accumulatively and become so big suddenly that there's so much emotional distance between two people that they can't even hope that things can even get better between them.
You're right. I think sometimes people might not even realize that they're disrespecting. Sometimes it might be like you said, very casual, that you made a comment very casually, and because you didn't get a retaliation, you start to think it's okay to say it. And then you repeatedly do it. First it's private, and because you get a habit of it, you'll openly start doing it in front of other people. And that level of disrespect, you have no idea that you have caused to the other person, because now you're doing it in the open. So like you said, you're a lazy person. You'll probably first say it 5 times between only 2 people. And then it becomes a joke in front of your close friends. And then it becomes open common knowledge. Oh, he's very lazy. He won't pick it up. Give it to me.
Yeah.
But then you don't realize that how disrespectful you're being to your partner in a marriage by just openly in front of everybody characterizing him. So I think characterization is something people must be very wary of, instead of focusing, like you said, on the problem. I think always the focus goes away from the problem and goes on to the characterizing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how things escalate, right? In a conflict or any time, things escalate because yes, we are targeting the person rather than the problem.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. We're always targeting the person and not the problem. And if you just target the problem, it actually can be solved very easily. But if you think like the person is only the problem, then it's not really going to get solved. You'll have to walk away.
And it's the other way around also. So sometimes when people are actually talking about what they're upset with, that this happened, that happened, that I was going through this and I felt like I didn't feel that you were able to understand me. So now again, it's also possible that the other person, instead of really being curious about what is it that you're trying to say, what is it that she had a problem with, they might take it personally and feeling like an attack, and then they go on a defensive mode, giving excuses or being like, hey, I was listening, but you were the one, you kept going on and on, so what was I supposed to do?
Or you always crying about things.
Yeah, you're the dramatic one. All the time you're doing drama. How many times am I supposed to be there for you? Right? So when it starts happening, then it's like, I'm feeling hurt and I'm trying to express, that why was I feeling hurt? But, because you started to take personally, you started to attack me, that might make me feel even more hurt now. So then I might start coming to you and sharing what was hurting me. So this is also a dynamic. So it goes both ways, that, we need to stop taking things personally, stop making it personal as well when we are addressing something. And that's when we just, work on that itself can, I think de-escalate so many conflicts.
I completely agree. So let's talk about emotional intimacy versus emotional dependence, right? We often hear be emotionally vulnerable, but where does vulnerability end and emotional dependence begin?
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I would describe vulnerability as making somebody a part of my inner world, right? That's vulnerability. Like if I'm going through something, I'm sharing it with you. Or if I need you, I'm expressing that need. That's vulnerability. Dependency is when that need becomes also responsibility. That I'm expressing that need and I'm expecting you to
fulfill it no matter what.
To fulfill it, to be responsible, to fix that need or that problem. That would be dependency. So for example, let's say I had a hard day at work and I come back and I'm like, you know what, my day was so stressful. I was really missing you. Would love it, if we can go and spend some nice quiet time in the evening together. So I shared a vulnerable part about my day. I also shared a vulnerable need that, hey, I missed you and I would love to spend some time in the evening with you. That's vulnerability and it's very healthy. You're sharing a part of your world with the other person. But now, emotional dependency would be something like, I had a terrible day today. I was expecting you to call me and check up on me. You didn't call me, and now see, because of you, I had such a bad evening as well. So now I'm holding you responsible for my terrible day. Now that's emotional dependency. So that becomes more like that you are responsible for my feelings and you're responsible to fix it. You're responsible to ensure that I'm okay and I'm happy. But that's not okay. That's not healthy in a relationship. That puts a lot of pressure on the other person.
Yeah, I
so
think
that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I think it's like I need to be safe, but you need to ensure I'm safe.
Yeah.
It's me asking for help is one thing, but me needing you to fix it without me asking is a crazy responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think it happens. I think it's very common. You don't even realize that you're doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Then it becomes like, then why else am I married?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's also about that I can't do without you. You know that I need you. So it's also expressed in a way that can feel like love. It can feel like, oh, sometimes we even flaunt it that, what, my husband, he just can't do without me. He really needs me. So it might feel like it's love, but it's actually emotional dependency. And that's not healthy neither for me nor for my partner.
Is it healthy for your partner to be your primary emotional outlet, or does that create psychological pressure on the relationship?
Yeah, why not? I would say that, in close partnership, whether it is long-term relationships or marriage, one would expect their partner to be their go-to person, to want to go and share, to want to go and be supportive. But yes, very important, it needs to be mutual. As long as it's mutual, it's very healthy. But very often what I see is that it becomes a one-sided dynamic wherein one person is leaning on and constantly needing the other partner to hold emotions for them or to fix things for them, and the other person is just holding space, fixing, giving, and not really receiving that same support, right? So then it becomes a problem, because then there is an imbalance. One person will, like the person who is giving and holding space, will obviously start to feel overwhelmed. They might even become resentful over a time that, okay, I'm the only one who's giving. And the other person who is receiving that support will become dependent on this other person and start relying. They become their whole world. So the moment that person is not there around, they break down completely. So for both people, it's not healthy.
So when someone says, you complete me, and this is something I think that's been romanticized for years, right? Do you think that's a red flag for emotional enmeshment?
I would say it depends on what the person meant when they said that you complete me. Sometimes it can be just a very romantic line to say that. They just might mean that, hey, you add value to my life, or you mean a lot, you fulfill me. So if they are saying it from that context, well, it's beautiful, right? It's a nice line to hear about yourself. But if they mean it literally, I think, yes, then it definitely could be a red flag, especially when they are trying to express that they can't do without you. So we are again talking about emotional dependence over here, when their entire life, sort of their world, revolves around you. And without you, they don't have an individuality. You are the one that sort of adds that, that sense of self. So the sense of self is missing, and it's the relationship that they rely on to feel any sense of self.
Yeah, to have an identity only because of the relationship.
Yeah. So if you find that, your partner is slowly losing interest in their work, not meeting their friends, their family, and their focus is entirely about you. So it may feel like the partner is very doting in the beginning, and you might feel like, wow, I have such a doting, such a sincere partner who's making me a priority. But often, if that continues, what happens is, of course, they're losing their individuality. They start getting too dependent on you, and then you might feel like there is no space in the relationship.
Claustrophobic.
There is no breather. Then it adds a lot of pressure. So obviously, if they literally mean that, and you start to see signs of it in the relationship, that actually you are literally completing them, then I would say watch out. It's quite an important red flag to look out for. But yeah, as long as they mean it romantically, they're just saying it as a gesture or, just to just be romantic, of course, then take it in a nice, happy manner.
So tell me, let's talk about conflict, the real predictor of marriage, right? And I think, like we discussed first, if conflicts are not resolved correctly, the best of relationships can be doomed, right? Because I think the conflict resolution, everybody can love,
Yeah.
but how do you fight well? I think that really predicts how a relationship is going to go. You have to be able to fight well. So in your experience, what type of conflict actually destroys marriages?
Yeah. I would say that, yeah, number one, it's contempt, like we talked about earlier. And the second one would be the turning in and turning away, because that's exactly what make people live two separate lives inside a marriage. And obviously, when we keep parallelly going about our lives without it converging anywhere, you're bound to have that distance, and conflicts then become even more escalated. So let me give an example here. Yeah, for instance, I think I was just hearing somebody talk to me because we just met in the flight, and this person was describing his wife. How different the wife is from him, and they were into a marriage for they were about 22 years of marriage, so it's a long marriage to have. But he described his marriage to be very lonely, and I got a little curious, and I was like, "Would you mind sharing why you feel that way?" And he went on to say that, well, my wife and I are very different. She's someone who loves partying, who loves socializing. I'm someone who likes it, but maybe not so much. She's someone who loves to go to 5 stars, and even when we travel, she would like to have the best, property. And I'm someone who doesn't like to probably spend so much so lavishly. She's someone who loves like high-end cars, and I'm okay with just utility-based. So this is how we are very different. So when he described it, it didn't sound very much wrong. That he's just describing two different personalities, and that's very natural. It happens in marriages because you're coming from different places, different values, so naturally there will be difference. Now when we explored more, that's when here the contempt part starts coming in. So one is that, oh, he likes parties, I don't like partying, that's okay. But when we assume that, oh, she likes parties, so she's so trivial and so superficial, she likes superficial things, whereas I'm more in depth, and I feel like I'm more wise, and I'm a better human being. So when we approach it from that lens, automatically our day-to-day interactions also will be different. That, oh, वो तो party में जा रही है,
उसका काम ही यही है.
Yeah. So it's okay to have two different interests altogether. There will be two different interests. But when we look down upon the other person's passions and interests, and we think we are superior to them, that our interests are better and more important, whereas the other person's interest is trivial and is
surface level,
that they are very showy, or, they don't care about money. When we are assuming ourselves to be better than the other, that automatically our tone, the way we manage conflict, the way when the other person is approaching to us with a problem, instead of really thinking or understanding the problem, automatically we are assuming we are better off. So we are never going to really see the problem as something that needs to be understood. It will always be like, okay, how do I explain to this person that their problem is not good enough, so I'll always come from a place of dismissing that problem rather than really understanding that problem. So naturally, when such a dynamic exists, conflicts will never be resolved. It will only escalate to a point. Maybe it might reach a point when both the partners are not really even reaching out to each other. So that might lead to something called as, silent resentment, when passive aggression, wherein you're not really approaching the issue, you're suppressing it. Maybe because previous times when you have approached it or addressed it, it was never understood.
You were dismissed.
Yeah, you were dismissed, so you feel like there's no point. My partner will never understand me, so I might as well keep it to myself. But has the problem gone away? No. So it's just slowly building resentment, and it's just accumulating over and over and over.
That was actually my next question, that I feel like, especially in Indian marriages, because communication is not something that's a very massive part of Indian marriages. And I'm talking about India as a whole. I'm not talking about just modern relationships today. I'm talking about India as a nation. We still live in a culture, Indian culture, where silent resentment probably plays the biggest role in a marriage.
I couldn't agree more. And I would say the reason for that is that we've not had healthy role models. We've not seen healthy conflict resolutions around us. Either it is somebody adjusting and just, quietly suppressing something, or, giving silent treatment, or it is, really loud, unhealthy, aggression or shouting and violence. We've just seen either this or that. There is nothing in between. So naturally, when we have not seen that, we have not learned that, and we assume that, those two are the only ways to sort of maybe diffuse a conflict or address a conflict. So that's one important thing. Plus, when we look at it from a gendered way, and again, I would bring how women are conditioned to be someone who adjusts, who is understanding, who doesn't speak up too much, who
Takes the brunt.
Because communicating or complaining can be held against you, can be like, oh, this person wants too much, so when that is the case, very often women find that there's a lot of guilt comes in when they try to express a need, even if it's a genuine need. And I have seen it even within my sessions when I have just out of curiosity, I've just asked that, hey, this is something that you're facing, but have you expressed it to your partner? And what comes to me is very surprisingly is that they haven't expressed it, because they feel like if they express it, then it'll be held against them. And even when they do, they feel guilty that, okay, maybe I shouldn't have said it. So, but if we don't even express our need, how is our partner even going to know that it matters to us? So I feel like a very important aspect that also makes relationships a lot more complicated than it really needs to be is when we expect our partner to mind read us. Sometimes when I say that, hey, why don't you tell your partner that you need this? And then sometimes what I hear back is that, but what's the point? Shouldn't they know me by now? Shouldn't they do it because they know I like it? But very often we might think it's obvious, but it's not so obvious. And sometimes things need to be said, and maybe not once, twice, but it might need to be said over and
Repeatedly.
over again. Because again, they also have their own patterns. And like we discussed, that awareness itself is not enough. Action needs to happen. And for that action to happen, we need to be aware that, okay, we need to break that pattern very, very intentionally. So one is that mind reading will never work, because the other person will never really know what's important to you unless we express it. And even when we express it, we might have to express it again and again, because they are also trying to break their pattern and be more intentional about doing things for you.
Correct.
So yeah, I guess mind reading is something we need to really do away with when it comes to long-term relationships.
So tell me, when couples say we never fight, do you see that as a healthy sign, or do you see emotional avoidance?
Wow, okay. I would be very curious if somebody says that to me, because I think it can mean two very different things. Either it could mean that that the couple is in harmony so much that they see things before it even happens. They are able to make changes. They are able to address it a lot before it escalates. So it might actually be healthy. But more often than not, that's not the case. Especially in the Indian context, it usually shows that perhaps there is a lot of avoidance happening in the relationship. So maybe one of the partner or both, they're trying to avoid the conflict for whatever reasons. It could be because they are being conditioned to not bring up issues, they are conditioned to suppress. It could be because they are pretend playing, they just want to things to look good on the surface. And that also happens quite a bit. We are performing in the relationship. We want it to look like a perfect picture, maybe to the outside world, maybe to our Instagram. And
maybe to our friends.
Yeah. Maybe even to ourselves. Sometimes we even want to fool ourselves that, hey, I'm in a great relationship. So I might not bring up something that's affecting me. But sooner or later, because things that are suppressed has not gone away. They're just brushed under the carpet, and you will meet them, and except when you meet them and it comes to you, it will just come in a very volatile way, something which is unexpected. And usually when that happens, it becomes very ugly, and it's not just a conflict, it becomes chaos very often. So yeah, it's definitely, if there is no conflict in the relationship, you might want to ask that, okay, am I performing in the relationship? Am I becoming too much of a people pleaser, in this case a partner pleaser, wherein I'm just trying to fit in and please the partner? In that manner, I might just end up losing my own individuality in doing so. And third is that maybe I'm just trying to avoid bringing up something because I feel that there is no emotional safety in the marriage. Because if I bring it up, it will not be taken well. I will also be attacked, or my partner will not understand it. It will lead to a lot of aggression in the marriage. So I might avoid it for those reasons as well. But a lack of conflict is very hard to imagine,
Yeah.
because again, if you see
Any
different
two people, yeah.
And
even friendship, any relationship,
even parents, like if we live with our parents, there will be conflicts.
yeah,
right?
with your siblings,
Yeah.
with your parents, with your family, your own family, you have
Yeah.
conflict. So how is it possible to not have conflict with people you're married to who've come from a completely different genre, background, upbringing, value system, everything? There will be conflict. So yeah, I am very skeptical when someone says, my reaction would not even be like, oh, they're in harmony. My reaction would be like, what are they hiding?
Yeah.
Who have they murdered and what are they hiding? Because I'd be very suspicious. Because it's not possible. Like even in a day, you start from morning to night, you will have a disagreement on something very small. It can become a conflict, it can become a massive fight, or it's just a disagreement.
Yeah.
That's the view of two people. But you land up disagreeing on things. Something as small as, I'll tell my husband, you told me to call you up at 11, you had some appointment, right? There was a reminder. No, I never asked you. Yeah, you did. 11 o'clock you said, call me and tell me. Oh, I don't remember saying this. Okay, never mind. Can you just do this because you asked me? That is resolving the disagreement. Or it would be like, no, but you said, see, you never remember what you tell me. You never are accountable for what you're saying to me. And it'll turn into him saying 3 things back to me. That small disagreement can turn into a conflict.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's as simple as that. You can disagree on something so small, you can turn it into a conflict or you don't.
Yeah.
And I think no relationship can be conflict free. I find it hard to believe. Like I said, I would really be suspicious that, oh, we never fight. But what are you doing? It's very normal to have a fight, to have a disagreement. So let's talk about attraction, desire, and long-term love. Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on from all the fights and conflicts and disagreements. Tell me, do you think some people deeply love their partner, right? But slowly lose desire for them? Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the spark missing? It's the sexual attraction missing? Or do you think genuinely people can just grow apart and fall out of love?
Yeah. So you're saying that they are in love, but the attraction has gone down in a way.
Could be.
Yeah.
Or is it other reasons?
Yeah.
We call it attraction. Sometimes
Yeah.
you say, I'm not attracted to them anymore.
Yeah.
But is it really that?
Yeah, because attraction is fleeting. It's not possible that you will be attracted to someone 24/7. It's impossible, especially in a long-term relationship. You cannot continue to be attracted to the person. It goes up and down because it's something which, attraction as we call it, it is something that makes you feel alive. It gives you that little bit of spark or that butterfly, which initially it's definitely there, because whenever something is new, so that novelty factor adds that attraction. But when you start living with that person and over a period of time, it's possible that the attraction goes down. But again, attraction going down does not mean love is going down. They're two different things. So now let's understand what happens in a marriage, right? One is that in a marriage, after a while, you're not just looking at the other person as partners. You're also seeing them as somebody who is fulfilling different roles. So, you start seeing them as someone who is fulfilling a function. It could be somebody who's managing the house, somebody who's managing your children, who is taking care of the finances. So we start seeing the person not just as individuals, but of the roles that they are fulfilling. So it's possible that they start seeing the other person less as an individual and more as somebody who's fulfilling the function of being your co-parent, or being somebody who's taking care of your parents, somebody who's taking care of your needs, your household needs, somebody who's taking care of your finances. And naturally, when two people come together, obviously you're fulfilling a lot of different functions. And then you start becoming somebody who is just becoming a fulfilling the roles and the duties and the expectations. And that's when you start losing the connection with each other as romantic partners. And this I see very often in Indian context when it comes to when a couple has a child, then suddenly it becomes the family subsystem. So the couple subsystem start to lose its importance, and this happened very often. Just recently I met a couple, and they were somebody who were finding it very difficult when it comes to intimacy, and that's what they wanted to work upon. And just a few questions in, when I asked them that, okay, how do you spend time together, just the two of you? And they just started looking at each other. And I asked, you do spend time together, right? Just the two of you. And they're like, maybe not, because usually we go out, as a family together. So it's like they're going for dinner with their children, they're going for movies with their children, the travels are also happening with their children, which is great. Of course, it's important to bond as a family. But do you really bond as a couple? Do you have date nights? And very often it comes to my surprise that no, they don't. And it could be because of functional reasons. Maybe they don't have somebody to watch their kids because now we are in nuclear families. We don't know where to sort of leave them. But very often it's also not something that they realize that they need to do consciously, intentionally. And soon when they start doing that, very quickly the result starts coming in. Suddenly the attraction comes back in the marriage. The intimacy starts to get better. So I would say it's not something that's if the attraction has gone, it doesn't mean that it's gone forever. It's possible to bring it back.
So let's talk about the childhood blueprint of love. Many therapists say we marry someone we are psychologically familiar from childhood. Either our mother or our father, we've grown up seeing them behave in a particular way towards each other, and we land up becoming one of them. This is a very popular saying. You're either your dad or your mom after you get married. Do people actually choose partners independently, or do you think we're repeating emotional patterns?
I think that might be true, and it happens on a very subconscious level. And I guess anybody who's read Freud knows what I'm talking about. While we have, of course, dismissed a lot of the theories that he's talked about, but this is something that very often happens. So, for instance, if I have grown up with an emotionally unavailable father, a father who has not really been around, who's been distant, who's been ignorant, that has become something that I've grown up with. So that is what is familiar to me. So even though I may not like that dynamic, even though I can tell you that, hey, I don't like my father and he's never been there for me, it's possible that I might get attracted to someone who displays similar trait, like who might just be a little bit emotionally distant. I might just find that attractive, and I may not know that. So this is not something that I'm intentionally choosing, that I want somebody who actually looks like my father or acts like my father. Obviously, I don't like my father, so I don't even want my partner to be like my father. But attraction is something which is, again, it happens inside. It's very neurological. We're not aware of it.
Yeah.
So initial attraction can actually happen to persons who could feel very familiar, because our nervous system, it loves things that are familiar. Anything that's new, it tells us as danger. So even though a healthier partner, somebody who's actually there for me, who is caring, who is loving, who is paying attention to me and my needs, they might be right there in front of me, but because my nervous system is not used to it, I might be like, oh, that's so boring, that's dull. And I might dismiss it and not feel attracted towards it. Whereas somebody who is not giving me any attention, who is making me chase the person, who is hot and cold, because that feels familiar, my nervous system might tell me that, hey, this is the person. So the nervous system is not giving us always the right cues, it's just giving us familiar cues.
What is comfortable for us.
So if we lean into it, it's possible that we might land up with something or someone who we are, might feel initially attracted to, but may soon realize that, okay, this person is not really meeting my needs in the relationship. So if you find it sooner, that's good for you. But a lot of times people end up in long-term relationships or marriages where they can't get out of it, and they realize it much later. So yeah, it's very unintentional, but when you're aware of it, it's possible that you can make better choices intentionally.
So you do end up marrying a parent, a person with the parental traits.
Very often.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can happen, and you hear it very often, right? That my husband is exactly like my father, or the guy will say my wife is a lot like my mom. Probably wouldn't know why and what made them choose, but yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, it's what you're familiar with, what is comfort to you.
Yeah.
You've grown up in that environment, you've grown up with those traits, and also it's you how you learn to deal with those. So you know how to deal with that emotion. Like, for example, you gave an example of a father being emotionally distant. As a child growing up, I would know how to be with a father who's emotionally distant. If my father was clingy suddenly, I wouldn't know what to do, right? Because I've never dealt with that. So I suddenly wouldn't know what to do with a clingy partner.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh my God, this is so weird. Why is he so clingy? I'd probably run. So I think, yeah, you said, like you said it very correctly, it's the comfort we are chasing, and the comfort we've had of dealing with certain traits, personality traits, and things like that, that we feel like this is what is good for me.
Yeah, which is why you would, we find so many people who keep attracting similar kind of people, right? We might even say that I don't know why I'm always ending up in these relationships. Like the pattern is the same kind of, personalities, the same kind of traits that we are attracting, and ending up with the same result. But we are unable to break that pattern because it's happening in a very unintentional, very subconscious way. So it requires a lot of awareness to be able to break that pattern finally. In fact, because you mentioned about men as well, about wanting a partner that is a lot like their mothers. In fact, there's so many men who say it out loud also, that, okay, what are you looking at? Oh, I'm looking at someone who's just like my mom, who's warm and nurturing and cooks like my mom. So they say it out loud as well. So it's not something that also is very unintentional. Sometimes our whole wants or our checklist may also be coming from that perspective, because we've grown up with that. So yeah, that's familiar. That's what we know.
Comfort.
Yeah.
So today many couples are therapy aware, attachment style aware, trauma aware. Has psychological language improved relationships according to you, or do you think they have made people more self-focused?
Yeah, I think that's a very important topic to talk about in today's times, because these terms have become very, very common, and people are using it in day-to-day vocabulary as well. Therapy speak has become very common. So when we use this language, like for example, attachment styles, that I know what my attachment style is. When we talk about love languages, that I know what my love language is, I know what my partner's love language is. I know that I like to receive gifts. So I tell my partner that, hey, if you want to woo me someday, just get me something nice and thoughtful, and that's your job. So if we are able to express it in that manner, it's beautiful, right? Like nobody has to do the mind reading part. I'm able to express it that, hey, receiving gifts is my love language, and my partner tells me that, hey, for me, physical touch is my love language. So then I know what to do for my partner whenever that partner is upset. Similarly, when it comes to attachment styles, if I know what my attachment style is, that I am very anxiously attached. So whenever I don't get communication from my partner, I start to worry that my partner is leaving me, abandoning me. So I might just get too clingy and call him again and again and again. So now, when I have done that, now that I have words for it, I can express it in that manner. I also know that, okay, this is what is happening. It's not that my partner is leaving me. It's because of my attachment style. I'm believing that my partner is leaving me, and hence I have the urge to call him 100 times. So now that awareness can help me now to work on that behavior. But very often what's happening is that we are just leaving it to the stage of awareness, that I have this attachment style. So now when my partner complains that, hey, you knew I was in a meeting, why were you calling so many times? So instead of saying and taking accountability for it, that, hey, I'm sorry, I just got very anxious, and I might just say, don't you know I have an anxious attachment style? So of course, you should be more understanding about it. So when we put the responsibility on the other person to take care of, what we are dealing with, could be our trauma, could be our triggers, that's when it starts to become a problem. It's not the other person's responsibility to take up that. It's your responsibility. So if I know it, I should be working on it. Yes, I can ask for, some cutting of slack that, hey, I'm sorry, I'm working on it. Could you be a little more patient? I'll try to work hard more. Maybe I'll try to be better next time. So taking accountability is very important, but we are not doing that, I think, as a generation right now. We're just stopping at that awareness level that this is what it is. I have this style, I have this trigger, that, what, this triggers me. Very often I hear that statement.
Oh my God. I don't even think people know what the depth of the word trigger means.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's used loosely.
Loosely. Sometimes it's even directed that you are triggering me. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off. That's become so common, and especially when we see that, it's reinforced on social media that, hey, these are the red flags. You must just cut off these people. So when we've started to become so quick in cutting off people, we notice one trait and we're like, oh, that person is a red flag. I need to cut off. That becomes unhealthy. Then we are just labeling people. We are just seeing people as one small slip up, and we are completely disregarding. And that can be so harming as well, right? Which is why I've also seen this trend in relationships, that we are also becoming a lot more guarded. We are not opening up very much, and rightly so, because when we are so easily ghosted, when when relationships break without any proper closure, when the other person just dismisses us because one trait they see and they're like, oh, you're a red flag, or you trigger me, it becomes very hard to trust the other person emotionally. And when we are guarded, it's very hard for a relationship also to be any deeper. So it's like a cycle, a vicious cycle that we are getting in. So of course, the goal is for the language to help us with being more self-aware, so it helps us to work on those areas. But if we use it to label the other person, to shield ourselves from that responsibility and accountability, and weaponize it, then we are losing the cause, and it's not helpful. So I think as a generation, we need to look at ourselves and reflect that, do we want more awareness to help us and have deeper, fulfilling relationships, or do we want to be like guarded individuals just performing in relationships? I guess it's an important area to think about.
Also, I don't think like cutting off everyone is an answer. You can't cut off everyone. How will resilience come if you don't know how to put up with something that's not right, or not right according to you? There was a time, I think, in our society, going back 2 generations, when you had all sorts of relatives, you knew how they were. You knew the toxicity they brought to your life. You knew some people were manipulative. You knew some people were liars. But you kept up relationships. You kept up. And now that is called toxicity. Oh, you kept up with them. But why not? It's called resilience. It's called acceptance. You cannot change everybody. You cannot make everybody honest, clear-hearted, trigger-free, trauma-free.
Yeah.
So the best thing would be to accept that there are people who are manipulators, there are people who are red flags, there are people who are liars, there are people who are cheaters, there are people who are all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I think the whole point of awareness, according to me, is being able to accept people with all these flaws. If you're going to cut out and shut everybody out, where is your resilience going to come from? It's like I can do 100 burpees. Don't ask me to do 120, you're triggering me. But if I don't try the 120, how will I know my resilience? It's a different analogy to personality, but I'm just giving an example of how the body tries what it's given.
Yeah.
We only push ourselves as hard as we're told to. If I run 1 kilometer today, probably by the end of 2026, I'm able to run 10. If I push myself to. Just like that, I feel like acceptance of people, being resilient towards people, learning how to deal with people with different personalities. Not everybody in your life is going to be how you are. You are going to get an array of personalities that you're going to come across. But if you keep shutting out people in the name of red flag, how do you learn to deal?
I think we've become very black and white as a generation.
But then nothing is black and white. The world is grey.
Yeah. So it's either like, are they all red flags, or small little thing, cut them off. So I see that as a contrast, because there are many people who would be in toxic relationships, who would, even though they can see 100 things that are wrong in a relationship, they're quietly adjusting, they're quietly, even excusing those behaviors for the other partner. So, of course, we don't want to be that. But at the same time, we don't want to be on the other extreme as well.
That's what I'm saying. There's
so
a middle ground.
It's the extremes that is a problem. It's not black and white. Can we be somebody who can see that, okay, yeah, this is a behavior I do not like, and this person often displays this behavior. So how should I respond to this behavior in a way that
or I can walk away
safeguards me
respectfully.
also? Yeah, that safeguards me. So it could be a boundary that I will lay, that okay, maybe next time this person brings up this topic, I'll probably politely tell the person that, hey, this is not a topic that I want to talk about. Or I will, like you said, walk off, when that topic comes in. I don't like when this group, starts gossiping, and that's not something that I like. So I'll just quietly get up and go. So I don't have to cut off from those people, but I can choose to add boundaries so that it can safeguard me from it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be on the extremes. I'm not saying suffer in pain and silence, but I'm saying there has to be some resilience also. You can't completely be like, I'll safeguard myself, now I live in a white box and nobody can trouble me. Then you're lonely, you're alone. If you don't know how to deal with anybody with any flag, so you have to be able to do that as well. So according to you, tell me, what is the most misunderstood truth about love?
That love is just an emotion. Because love is a lot more than that. It's also a skill that needs to be constantly learned and reshaped and evolve. It's not just something I feel a lot of love for this person. That's not enough. Love also needs to translate into actions. It also needs to be a skill that, okay, if I love this person, how does this person wants to be loved by me? That's also a question to be known. That I'll give you one example here. So a lot of times in traditional households, you will see the older women, the way they like to pamper a person is through the medium of food. So you go to their house, and if they want to show a lot of love to you, they'll start feeding you, right? But it's possible that maybe you're on a diet and you don't want to eat what they are giving you. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you're off sugar and they're trying to feed you sweets. So of course the intention is beautiful, it's pure. They're just trying to express their love. But you are somebody who doesn't want that kind of love, right? So if love was enough, then we wouldn't be having so many conflicts in marriages where two people are in love. But love is not enough. It's also important to know how that person wants to be loved, and what can I do to work towards, and that might be a skill you may not have right now. You might have to work on it, and vice versa. So does your partner. But when we just fold hands and be like, oh, I love this person and this person loves me, and now things will just go on autopilot, it'll never happen like that.
Yeah, it won't happen. Absolutely. There's so much work required. So in relationships, is honesty always healthy, or do you think some truths are left better unspoken?
Wow, okay. I would say that it's again not very black and white. It's not like we have to share everything in the relationship, or we have to hide some truths. I would ask that, what is the function of that honesty? What is the intent behind it? If there is something that you wish to share that's a little uncomfortable, what are you sharing it for? Is it because you want to just relieve your guilt? Maybe you have slipped up and you want to share because it's bothering you. So you're sharing it for yourself, versus you are sharing it because maybe you want to start afresh and you want to take accountability for it. So the intent matters. Number two, how you share the truth also matters a lot, that honesty, right? Because I think we are living in a world where a lot of times we say things to a person and call it, oh, I was just being honest. And it was extremely rude, I think,
and hurtful.
And hurtful, right? So it's very important that when we are communicating that honesty, it's communicated in a sensitive manner, that it's taken well. It's like a constructive feedback rather than something that you just want to get out of your system and feel better about yourself, right? In the context of, let's say, maybe slipping up or infidelity, again, what are you sharing it for? Is it to make the other partner jealous? Is it to say that, hey, I have attention from other people? Is it to say that to relieve your guilt? Is it to just put the responsibility on the other person that, hey, our relationship is not working and you need to put in the work? So, the intent matters, how you say it matters, and also the timing also matters when you choose to speak that truth. So when the person is down in the dumps and you share something which you know is going to affect the person, it's not going to help your relationship. It's only going to take it more down in the dumps. So it's very important that you choose the right moment to share it, and also with a lot of sensitivity to share it.
I think also honesty, sometimes you need to question, does it change the end result? Otherwise, it's pointless to share it. So if you ask me, I made this presentation, tell me honestly, is it good? Let's say you're my husband and you're asking me. And I say, Charvi, this presentation is super average, you're not going to do well tomorrow, you really need to work on it. That honesty is actually going to change the result of your interview tomorrow or your meeting tomorrow. But if you ask me something that has no result as such, you're just asking me something and I have to give you an honest answer. I don't have to be honest. Sometimes I can just do it so that you are happy about it. So I think we need to choose also that, is it changing the result sometimes or not?
Yeah.
And
that's why the timing also matters.
So if you ask me, do you have a good relationship with my mother? You're my partner and you ask me, let's say I'm a husband and I ask my wife, do you have a good relationship with my mother? Maybe I don't have the best relationship. Maybe I see her 3 times a year on festivals and I don't really feel love for her. But do I have to be honest about it? Do I have to hurt the partner? Why can't I turn around and be like, I do have a really good relationship. I have to only meet her 3 times a year. So sometimes you choose your honesty based on result. What does it result in? What does the honesty result in? And it's not about lying. It's about protecting sometimes your partner's feelings. Sometimes you lie just to protect their partner's feelings. And I don't think that's a lie. I think it's just choosing your truths wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the intention about it, behind it, matters a lot. That, are you saying it to hurt the other person? Are you saying it to safeguard the relationship? Because sometimes some truths are
better left unspoken, just for the sake of the relationship.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. So finally, tell me, what does a psychologically healthy marriage actually look like? Not the Instagram version, but the real one.
According to me, a psychologically healthy marriage is where, number one, there is a lot of emotional safety, which means that you are not afraid to tell your partner that you are hurt. You can go up to them, tell them what's bothering you, and know that they will try to understand you rather than using it against you. Very important thing, which also means that instead of becoming attacky and defensive, you try to understand the partner. Instead of trying to win the argument, you're trying to be curious about what might be going on. So that's emotional safety. Second point I would say is that where there is a beautiful balance between individual space and a couple subsystem coming together. So where I feel like I can be completely myself. I don't have to walk around eggshells. I have my own life, my own interests and passion that give me a lot of joy and fulfillment. At the same time, there is a lot of value in my partnership, and I know that we overlap somewhere. We have something, wherein we converge. It could be something like a common passion. It could just be sharing our lives together, sharing our interests together, not just doing things together, but also taking interest in each other's lives together. And number 3 is when roles and expectations are talked about with honesty. And this is, I want to emphasize here because it's very important in the Indian context. A lot of times we just go into a marriage with our own expectations without it being communicated to the other person, and vice versa. And that creates a lot of conflict. So when there is honest communication, not just what you expect from your partner in the matter of partnership, but also how you expect, because in Indian marriages, it's not just about 2 people coming together. There are also families involved. There are roles and expectations. So it's about knowing that, okay, what does my partner expect of me in the context of the family? What roles am I expected to fulfill? And both as a man and as a woman, especially in today's times, because women may enter the marriage thinking that, oh, we are living in equal times and my partner will share the load equally. But when we enter into it, we realize, oh no, things are different. Similarly, a man might enter into the marriage thinking that, oh, my mother always did all of this. My wife will also obviously take up the same roles. So when these roles and expectations are not communicated well, it often brings a lot of conflict. So a lot of clarity, honest communication. If these three elements are present, I would say it can lead to a fairly healthy psychological well-being.
Great. I think that's a great way of putting it. There are obviously many aspects, but yeah, to sum it up, these sound absolutely reasonable to me as well. That you need clarity of communication, you need conflict resolution, and you need emotional regulation. Thank you, Charvi. It's been amazing having you. Thank you for coming to the Human Thread.
Thank you for having me. Hi, my name is Charvi. I'm a counseling psychologist, a psychotherapist, and I'm somebody who sees adult in therapy in day-to-day basis. If you want to know why relationships work or fail and about long-term marriages, watch this conversation on the Human Thread on all streaming platforms.